It was a warm morning in Chennai. Birds were singing. The street outside buzzed with scooters and school children. Inside a modest two-story house, Lakshmi Pichai stood in her small kitchen, her hands covered in flour. She was making dosas for breakfast, just like she had for the past 30 years. Then the phone rang. She wiped her hands quickly and picked it up. It was her son, Sundar. His voice was calm but excited. "Amma," he said softly, "I invited Prime Minister Modi to Google headquarters. He accepted. He's coming next month." Lakshmi froze. She held the phone tightly and leaned against the counter. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she whispered, "You did what Kana Sundar explained everything." The preparations had begun weeks ago. It was a huge moment, not just for Google, but for him, for India, for everything their family had worked for. He wanted her there, not as a guest, but as his Amma, standing by his side. "Amma, you have to come. You are the reason I became who I am. Modi ji must meet you." Lakshmi sat down. Her heart was beating fast. In all her life, she had never left India. She had never even sat on a plane. She was proud of Sundar, always had been, but she was just a simple school teacher. The idea of standing next to the Prime Minister of India and her son, the CEO of Google, felt like a dream that belonged to someone else. "I'm not made for that world, Kana," she said quietly. "But," Sundar's voice was gentle, "Amma, without you, there is no me." That line stayed with her. For days, she walked through the house touching old photos, running her fingers along the edges of worn textbooks she once used in her classroom. She thought of the nights she stayed up helping Sundar with science projects, the times they had to skip meals so he could have better books, the tears she had wiped from his eyes when he failed an exam, the quiet pride she had hidden when he first left for America, holding her cries until the train had left the platform. Now he wanted her there. Meanwhile, the news spread fast in the neighborhood. Everyone was talking about it. Neighbors came over with sweets and flowers. Some offered to buy her new saris, others asked her to bring back photos. But deep inside, Lakshmi was scared. She wasn't afraid of people. She wasn't afraid of cameras or crowds. She was afraid of not belonging. But then, one evening, she heard a knock at the door. It was her old student, Arun, now a doctor. He stood at the gate with his little daughter and smiled. "Ma'am," he said, "you taught us how to believe in ourselves. Now it's time you believe in you." That night, Lakshmi sat on her bed with a suitcase open. She placed inside it not clothes, not jewelry, but memories. A small photo of Sundar when he was 6, her old teaching notebook, a cotton sari gifted to her by her late husband, and a single dried rose Sundar had given her after winning a school science prize. And then, slowly, the fear began to melt, because this was not just about Sundar or the Prime Minister. This was about her story finally being seen, and it had just begun. The morning of her departure arrived. The sun rose slowly behind the trees, casting a soft golden light across the narrow street of her neighborhood. Lakshmi Pichai stood in the doorway of her home, her small suitcase beside her. She looked back at the house, its cracked walls, the old wooden swing in the corner, the kitchen window where she had watched Sundar leave for school every day. Now, she was the one leaving. Neighbors gathered outside, offering their blessings and teary smiles. Someone placed a garland around her neck. Another gave her a small packet of turmeric for luck. They weren't just saying goodbye. They were sending part of themselves with her. At the airport, everything felt too big, too fast. People rushed around with sleek bags, talking into tiny earbuds. Screens blinked with strange codes. For a moment, Lakshmi felt lost in a world she didn't understand. Sundar had arranged everything. A kind staff member guided her through security. But when she stepped into the boarding area and saw the huge plane waiting outside the glass window, her knees weakened. She had taught science for 30 years. She knew how planes worked, but standing in front of one was different. She whispered a prayer and held tight to the tiny cloth bag she always carried, the one with her husband's photo and a few coins he had left behind. They were her strength. The flight was long. She sat quietly by the window, watching the clouds float like cotton over the earth. The flight attendant offered her food and water. She nodded politely, barely touching her meal. Instead, she kept looking at the stars outside. She wondered if Sundar had done the same when he first flew to America all those years ago. Was he scared too? Did he miss her like this? When the plane landed, everything was different. Cool air brushed against her face as she stepped out. People didn't speak Tamil. The signs were in English. She heard unfamiliar languages everywhere. It was beautiful, but overwhelming. Sundar was waiting for her at the airport. He was dressed simply. No suit, no bodyguards, just her boy with tired eyes and a warm smile. The moment she saw him, she dropped her bag and rushed into his arms. He held her tightly. "Amma," he whispered, "you made it." She looked up at him, tears in her eyes. "You grew up so far away, Kenna, but your hug feels just the same." He laughed, and for the first time in days, she laughed too. Over the next few days, Sundar took her on quiet walks around the Google campus. He showed her his small corner office, the cafeteria, the garden where employees meditated. People waved and smiled at her. Some even stopped to thank her. "Thank you for giving us, Sundar," one young engineer said, bowing slightly. Lakshmi was confused. "I didn't give anything," she said gently. "I just raised my son." The engineer smiled back. That was everything. As the day of the visit approached, preparations intensified. Reporters called. Secret Service agents checked every corner of the campus. A red carpet was rolled out. Flowers were arranged. A special hall was set up with flags, lights, and a quiet seat in the front row reserved for her. But the night before the event, Lakshmi couldn't sleep. She walked out onto the small balcony of the guest house where she was staying. So joined her with 2 cups of warm tea. They sat together in silence for a while, just like they used to back home. "What if I embarrass you tomorrow, Kenna?" she asked quietly. Sundar looked at her, eyes full of softness. "You could never embarrass me. You're the reason I am who I am." Lakshmi smiled faintly. Then her eyes grew misty. "Your father wanted to be here too. He always said you would become someone the world would know. But he never saw this day." Sundar touched her hand. "He's here, Amma. He's in everything we do." And that night, Lakshmi closed her eyes, no longer afraid of the stage, the cameras, or the powerful men. She was not just Sundar Pichai's mother. She was a woman who had walked through fire, who had given everything for her child, and who now stood at the edge of something greater than herself. Because sometimes, the journey of 1,000 miles starts not with a single step, but with a mother's quiet belief. The big day arrived. The sun rose gently over the Google campus in California, casting soft light across the green lawns and glass buildings. Everything had been polished to perfection. Red carpets were laid, flags from India and America waved gently in the breeze, and security teams stood at every corner. Lakshmi Pichai stood quietly in her simple cotton sari, her hair tied back the way she always wore it. Around her, cameras clicked, and people buzzed like bees. She stood out not because of the cameras, but because of her stillness. "Amma, you look beautiful," Sundar said as he adjusted the edge of her pallu. "Are you ready?" She nodded slowly. Her heart was steady now. Then, the motorcade arrived. Prime Minister Narendra Modi stepped out, surrounded by officials and dignitaries. The crowd grew silent. Lakshmi watched him with calm eyes. She remembered seeing him on television back in Chennai. Now he was walking towards her, but before he could reach Sundar, Lakshmi stepped forward. With grace and humility, she folded her hands in a namaste. Her eyes were kind, her back straight. Modi paused, then returned the greeting with equal respect. "Namaste." Amma, he said softly. There was a pause, a quiet moment that felt bigger than politics, bigger than power. It was the meeting of two lives built on struggle, service, and silent strength. I've heard so much about you, Modi added. Lakshmi smiled gently. He was a shy boy, always with a book in his hand. I never thought he'd invite the Prime Minister. One day, people around chuckled warmly. Sundar looked both nervous and proud. But then, something unexpected happened. Instead of going straight to the stage, Modi turned and gently took Lakshmi's hand. Walk with us, he said. The crowd gasped. Sundar's eyes widened. This wasn't part of the plan. She was supposed to sit in the front row quietly. But now, the world was watching as the Prime Minister of India walked side by side with the mother of the Google CEO. Reporters whispered. Cameras zoomed in. Phones lit up with live streams. Lakshmi, unfazed, simply walked with her head high, and a smile that came from decades of quiet sacrifice. She didn't speak much. She didn't need to. Her presence spoke louder than any speech. Once they reached the stage, she stepped aside to let Sundar and Modi take their places. But Modi stopped her again. Stay. The crowd applauded. Sundar stood at the microphone. His voice was calm but filled with emotion. Today is not just about technology. It's about people who dream quietly in corners of the world. People like my mother. Without her, I would not be here. She gave up everything so I could fly. He turned to her, his eyes shining. Double quotes, AMMA. This moment belongs to you. Lakshmi smiled, her hands folded again. She didn't need the spotlight. She didn't need applause. But in that moment, the world saw her not just as Sundar Pichai's mother, but as a symbol of resilience, grace, and strength. And then, something even more unexpected happened. Modi leaned over and whispered something to one of his aides. Moments later, the host of the event came forward. Mrs. Lakshmi Pichai, Prime Minister Modi would like to invite you to say a few words. The room fell silent. Lakshmi looked at Sundar. Only if you want to, Amma, he said softly. She stepped forward slowly. She stood at the microphone, holding it gently. Her voice was soft, but steady. I am just a teacher, she began. I never imagined standing here. But I want every mother, every father, every child in every corner of India to know it doesn't matter where you start. What matters is how much love you give, how much you believe in someone, even when the world doesn't. Tears filled eyes across the room. My son went far away to chase his dreams, but he never forgot home. And today, he brought me here not to show off, but to say thank you. The applause that followed was not loud. It was deep, emotional, powerful. People didn't just clap for her. They clapped for every parent who had ever stayed up late worrying. Every mother who had packed lunch quietly while hiding her hunger. Every teacher who gave more than they were paid for. Every heart that had believed in someone else's future. Lakshmi stepped down from the stage, her head held high, but what she didn't know was that, at that moment, her image was already being shared across the globe. The internet had exploded. People were calling her the mother behind Google. Some called her the heart of India in Silicon Valley, and some simply said, that woman reminded us what matters. By the time Lakshmi returned to her seat beside Sundar, her heart was beating gently like temple bells. She didn't know what she had started. She had only spoken from her heart. Her words were not rehearsed, not written on any paper. They came from a place deeper than memory, from sacrifice, from love. But outside that hall, her words were already traveling. The moment she said, I want every mother and child to know, it was clipped, posted, and shared. From tech blogs in California to radio shows in Delhi, her speech became a symbol. Journalists called it the 3-minute revolution. Strangers posted photos of their own mothers, writing messages like this is my Lakshmi Amma. Even students from small towns in India shared the video, tears in their eyes, saying, She reminded us we are not alone. Lakshmi did not know any of this at first. After the event, she simply walked back to the guest house with Sundar, her shoes dusty, her feet tired, her sari a little wrinkled. She didn't care. Was it okay, Kanna? She asked him. Sundar was quiet for a second. Then he hugged her tightly. Amma, it was perfect. You said what millions needed to hear. That evening, Google held a private dinner for the delegation. Prime Minister Modi sat with top engineers, investors, and global leaders. But everyone wanted a moment with Lakshmi. People stood in line, some with questions, others just to say thank you. A young Indian-American woman stepped forward with tears in her eyes. My mother also came here without knowing English. She worked in a laundry. When I saw you speak, I saw her. Lakshmi took her hand gently. Your mother is a warrior, she said. Back home in Chennai, people gathered around TVs and phones. Her neighbors couldn't believe what they were seeing. Was that our Lakshmi, our schoolteacher? The one who used to help us fill government forms and make tea during festivals? One neighbor said proudly, she spoke better than all those politicians. The next morning, Sundar's team received over 4,000 emails. Some were from mothers, some from sons, some from teachers. One man from a village in Rajasthan wrote, I had given up on sending my daughter to school. But after hearing I sold my old bike and enrolled her again. Please thank her for me. Lakshmi read that email aloud. Her eyes welled up. Kanna, she said softly, if even one girl goes to school because of this, it was all worth it. As her short visit came to an end, Sundar offered to show her more: the Golden Gate Bridge, Hollywood, even Niagara Falls. But she shook her head. I want to go home. There's work waiting. He laughed. You just became an international icon, amma. I'm still your amma, and my plants haven't been watered in 2 weeks. Sundar knew there was no changing her mind. She was never one to chase attention. Even now, when headlines read Google CEO's mother humbles Silicon Valley, Lakshmi was already folding her saris, wrapping sweets for the neighbors' children, and asking Sundar if he had enough wool socks for the winter. On the day of her departure, as she stood at the airport once more, Sundar hugged her tightly. Thank you, Amma, for everything. She looked up at him, smiling. Raise your children with kindness, Kanna, not pressure. Dreams don't grow in fear. Sundar didn't respond. His throat was tight as she walked away. Toward security, Lakshmi turned back one last time. Call me when you eat, okay? The plane lifted into the sky. The world below disappeared into clouds. And Lakshmi, now recognized across oceans, closed her eyes not to rest, but to remember. She remembered carrying Sundar in her arms during storms. She remembered reading him bedtime stories by candlelight during power cuts. She remembered borrowing chalk from neighbors when her classroom supply ran out. She remembered praying not for success, but for strength. And now, somewhere between the clouds and earth, she knew her journey had touched hearts far beyond her own. When Lakshmi Pichai stepped out of the auto rickshaw and onto the dusty street of her neighborhood in Chennai, everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. The street dogs barked at passing scooters. The vegetable vendors shouted prices with a wide smile, and the smell of freshly fried Vedas floated from the corner tea stall. Neighbors peeked out of their windows and came running. Some clapped, some cried, some folded their hands as if greeting a saint. Amma has returned. One boy shouted. Within minutes, her small home filled with people-bears, old students, temple priests, curious journalists. Some brought flowers, some brought gifts. But Lakshmi accepted only one thing, a drawing from a little girl that said, "Thank you for showing the way." She placed it near her prayer shelf. Her house had not changed. The walls still had peeling paint. The fan still made its soft worry sound, but a quiet light now filled every corner, like her journey had left pieces of sunshine behind. Her days returned to routine. She watered her plants, walked to the temple, helped children with homework. She wore her same cotton saris, but wherever she went, people stopped her not to praise her, but to talk, to listen, to ask. "My son wants to drop out of college," one mother said. "My daughter wants to become an engineer, but we don't know how to guide her," another father shared. Lakshmi listened with care. She didn't give grand speeches. She gave simple truths. "Don't force them," she said. "Just stay beside them. They will bloom." What started as a few conversations soon grew. Students from other towns wrote to her. Schools invited her to speak. One morning, a principal from a small government school came to her doorstep. "Ma'am," he said, holding his cap in both hands, "would you consider teaching again one day a week?" Lakshmi looked at her old chalkboard, still standing in the back room. Her fingers touched the edge of it. "Just one day," she nodded. "But I won't take salary." He smiled. "We'll pay you in smiles." Soon, Lakshmi's home became more than a house. It became a space of hope. Every Sunday, she opened her gate and let children come in. Some wanted help with homework. Some just wanted to sit near her and ask, "How did you make Sundar dream so big?" She never took credit. "I didn't teach him to dream," she said. "I just never stopped him when he did." One evening, as the sun set in glowing orange behind the temple tower, she sat with her hands folded, eyes closed in prayer. A soft breeze passed through her garden. Her phone buzzed beside her. It was a message from Sundar. Double quotes, AMMA. "I showed your speech at a school in Africa today." One girl came up and said, "If she can speak, so can I." Lakshmi smiled deeply. "The world doesn't need perfect people," she whispered. "It needs people who believe." And then, something unexpected happened. The government of India sent her a formal letter. It said, "We would be honored to recognize you with the Padma Shri Award for your lifelong service in education and your inspiring role in empowering youth." She was quiet for a long time. When the reporter asked her what she felt, she simply said, "I am grateful, but I have already received my award, the letters from students, the smiles from mothers. That is enough." She accepted the award, but not for herself. "This is for every mother who hides her hunger for her children's dreams," she said at the ceremony, "and for every teacher who teaches with empty pockets but a full heart." The room rose in applause. Lakshmi bowed her head. She remained who she had always been, calm, grounded, full of quiet power. It was the month of Pongal. The air in Chennai was filled with the smell of sugarcane, fresh rangoli powder, and boiling rice. Children ran through the streets with kites, and women hummed old songs while decorating courtyards with colorful designs. Lakshmi Pichai was busy. She had risen before sunrise. Her old stove burned steady, and her hands moved with grace, preparing sweet pongal in a brass pot. Outside her door, flowers were tied, banana leaves laid out. It was the same every year, simple, joyful. But this year, Sundar was coming home, after years of visiting for quick meetings or brief temple runs. He was returning just to be with her. No press, no speeches, no officials. Just Uma and Kanna. As the car pulled into the narrow lane, Lakshmi stood in the doorway, wiping her hands on her cotton sari. Sundar stepped out wearing a simple white kurta, carrying no laptop, no phone in hand. When he saw her, he smiled like a boy again. "Amma," he said, "I missed home." They hugged. No cameras clicked this time. No speeches waited. Only peace. They spent the day sitting on the old swing, eating pongal, with jaggery and ghee, sipping filter coffee from steel tumblers, and laughing over old stories. Sundar looked at the garden where his mother had planted tulsi and jasmine. "Everything feels the same," he said, "because some things should never change." She replied. Later that evening, as the sky turned golden and the streetlights blinked on one by one, Lakshmi took Sundar to the room where she kept all the letters from students, the small awards from schools, and drawings from children who had visited her. In the middle of it all was a new framed photo. It showed her, Sundar, and Prime Minister Modi standing side by side at the Google event. But what made Sundar pause was the small handwritten note at the bottom. It read, "The world saw my son that day, but I saw the boy who once cried over a broken pencil." Sundar turned to her, speechless. "Amma," he whispered. Lakshmi touched his hand. "I didn't raise a CEO. I raised a good human. Everything else came after." Sundar sat down beside her. He looked around at the room. No gold, no marble, no luxury. Yet it felt more complete than any boardroom he had ever stepped into. He asked softly, "Amma, do you ever wish for more?" She smiled gently. "I have the stars in my garden, Kanna. What more could I need?" They sat together in silence. As the night deepened, Lakshmi went into the kitchen one last time. She brought out a small wooden box. Inside it was a gold bangle, slightly worn, but polished with love. "Your appa gave me this on our wedding day," she said. "Now I give it to you, not to wear, but to keep close. To remember where you come from." Sundar held it gently. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. And that night, as the city slept and the stars watched quietly from above, Lakshmi sat by her window, sipping her last cup of tea. She wasn't famous to herself. She was still the same woman who had once bought second-hand notebooks, boiled rice over charcoal, and prayed under her breath before every school result. But the world had changed, not because she had asked it to, because she had shown it how. Months passed quietly. Lakshmi Pichai returned to her rhythm early mornings, school visits, helping young girls with books, and sipping tea by her garden wall. She had no desire for fame. She had no social media. Her phone still had buttons, instead of a touchscreen. Yet her story kept traveling without her even trying. One morning, as she swept the front steps, a group of strangers came walking down her street. Not officials, not reporters. They were students from different parts of the country. Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Uttar Pradesh, even Kashmir. They had come not for photos but for guidance. One girl stepped forward. She was wearing a worn salwar and dusty shoes, her hands full of scribbled notes. "Amma," she said softly, "my father wants me to marry this year, but I want to become a space engineer. What should I do?" Lakshmi took her hand gently. "If the door is closed," she said, "you must knock until your knuckles bleed. And if it still doesn't open, build your own door." The girl broke into tears. Lakshmi offered her a plate of lemon rice and a glass of water. "You can't chase the stars on an empty stomach," she said. After that, more came. Not all at once, but little by little. They brought dreams in their eyes and doubt in their hearts. Lakshmi didn't give them miracles. She gave them something more powerful. She gave them belief. Soon, a trust was formed in her name, not by her, but by former students and kind strangers. It helped girls get into schools, gave scholarships to children of single mothers, sent books to rural libraries, all in her honor. But Lakshmi refused to let it carry her name alone. "Call it Uma's gift," she said, "because every home has an Uma, and every Uma gives something." One winter, Sundar returned again quietly, this time with his wife and children. They all sat on mats in the courtyard, eating pongal under the sun. The children asked her questions about her teaching days, about what Sundar was like when he was young. "He was always dreaming," she said, laughing, "but he was also always hungry." Sundar grinned. "You're never going to stop telling that story, are you?" "Not until you eat more," she replied, placing another spoonful on his plate as the sun began to set. Sundar sat with her in the garden, AMMA, he said. "Do you know that people now call you the soul of India?" Lakshmi shook her head. "No, Kanna. I'm just the soul of this house." He looked at her with quiet respect. "You changed the world." She smiled. "No, Kanna. I just reminded it what mattered. That night, as the family slept and the city faded into the soft hum of crickets, Lakshmi sat by her window with her notebook. She wrote slowly, in Tamil. A letter not to the world, but to the next girl who would sit in her spot one day. Don't be afraid to dream beyond your walls. Don't wait for someone to choose you. Choose yourself. And when you rise, hold someone else's hand. That is how we all rise together. She folded the letter, placed it between the pages of her old school diary, and closed it gently. Outside, a jasmine flower had bloomed on her vine. Inside, something even brighter had bloomed in the hearts of those who had met her, because Lakshmi Pichai did not seek history. She became it without raising her voice, without seeking the crown, just by being what the world needed most, a mother who never stopped believing.